you've actually ridden one of these buses. Maybe it was a school trip, a long ride through the countryside, or a noisy city bus from decades ago. Back in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s, buses didn't just move people from one place to another. They had personality. Strange shapes, huge panoramic windows, engines roaring behind you, and designs that looked like they came straight from the future. Some of them were built from mountains, some were built for long highway journeys across entire countries, and some looked so unusual that even today people stop and ask, what kind of bus is that? In this video, we're taking a look at 5 of the strangest vintage buses ever built. Machines like the Saurer Alpenwagen, the legendary GMC Scenicruiser, the tiny Setra S6, the futuristic Flxible Starliner, and the iconic MAN SL200. And trust me, some of these buses look so strange you'd never believe they were actually driving on real roads. If you enjoy discovering rare vintage vehicles like these, make sure you subscribe, because there are many more incredible machines still waiting to be uncovered. All right, let's start with the first bus.
Now take a look at this bus for a second. At first glance, it might look like a normal vintage coach, but the Saurer Alpenwagen was anything but ordinary. This machine was built in Switzerland during the 1950s, and it had one very specific job: climbing some of the most dangerous mountain roads in Europe. We're talking about narrow alpine roads, steep slopes, sharp curves, and weather that could change in minutes. Back then, most buses simply couldn't handle that kind of terrain. But Saurer engineers designed the Alpenwagen specifically for the mountains. The chassis was incredibly strong, the engine produced serious torque, and the suspension was built to deal with uneven alpine roads. And if you look closely at the design, you'll notice something interesting. The bus sits slightly higher than many coaches of that era, giving it better ground clearance. That was crucial when driving on rough mountain routes, where the road surface wasn't always perfect. Inside, passengers had something even more impressive: incredible views. Huge windows allowed travelers to look out over the Swiss Alps while the bus slowly climbed through winding mountain passes. Imagine riding inside this thing while snow-covered peaks and deep valleys passed right outside your window. For many people in the 1950s and 60s, riding the Saurer Alpenwagen wasn't just transportation, it was part of the adventure. And that's exactly why this bus became such a legend. It proved that a coach could handle extreme terrain while still carrying passengers safely through some of the most breathtaking landscapes in the world. Today, the Saurer Alpenwagen is remembered as one of the most unique mountain buses ever built, a machine designed not just to drive roads, but to conquer them. Now this bus, you might actually recognize it. The GMC Scenicruiser is one of the most iconic buses ever built in the United States. But when it first appeared in the 1950s, people thought it looked like something from the future. Just look at the design. The front sits lower, the rear is raised higher, and the whole bus almost looks like it has 2 levels. That wasn't just for style, it was part of the engineering. The Scenicruiser was created for the famous Greyhound bus company, which at the time was trying to completely change long-distance travel. They wanted a bus that felt more like a moving observation deck than just transportation. So engineers designed the Scenicruiser with huge panoramic windows and a raised rear passenger section. People sitting in the back had an elevated view of the road, mountains, and landscapes as the bus traveled across the country. And back in the 1950s, that experience felt incredibly modern. Under the body, this machine was also very advanced for its time. Early models even used a twin-engine system, which was extremely unusual for a passenger bus. Later versions switched to a powerful Detroit diesel engine that became famous for reliability. But what really made the Scenicruiser unforgettable was its appearance. The moment it rolled into a bus station, it stood out. The shape, the height difference, the massive windows, everything about it looked bold and futuristic. For decades, these buses carried passengers across thousands of miles of American highways. And for many travelers, riding the Scenicruiser wasn't just a trip, it felt like a small piece of the future on wheels. Today, the GMC Scenicruiser is considered one of the most legendary bus designs ever created, a vehicle that proved transportation could be both practical and unforgettable at the same time.
Now, this next bus might surprise you. Compared to the massive coaches we usually imagine, the Setra S6 from 1955 actually looks small, almost too small to be a real long-distance bus. But that's exactly what made it so interesting. Back in the 1950s, most buses were big, heavy machines built mainly for city transport. But the German company Setra had a different idea. They wanted to build a coach that was lighter, more efficient, and perfect for smaller roads and regional travel. And the result was the Setra S6. One of the most important things about this bus was its construction. Unlike many buses of that era that were built on truck frames, the S6 used a self-supporting body design. That might not sound exciting today, but at the time it was a major innovation. It made the bus lighter, stronger, and much more stable on the road. If you look closely at the design, you'll notice how compact everything feels. The bus is shorter, the proportions are tighter, and the front has that classic rounded 1950s look. It almost feels like someone took a large coach and carefully shrunk it down. But despite its smaller size, the S6 was incredibly practical. It was perfect for narrow European roads, small towns, and mountain routes where large buses simply couldn't operate comfortably. Passengers inside still had a comfortable ride, and operators loved the bus because it was efficient and reliable. That combination quickly made the Setra name famous across Europe. And in many ways, the Setra S6 helped shape the future of coach design. The company continued developing this self-supporting construction, which later became standard for many modern buses. Today, the Setra S6 might look modest compared to giant coaches, but in the 1950s, it represented a completely new way of thinking about bus design, lighter, smarter, and built for real roads across Europe.
Now take a look at this bus for a moment, because the Flxible Starliner didn't just look different, it actually changed how people thought about long-distance travel. Back in the early 1950s, most buses were still pretty simple machines, boxy shapes, small windows, and interiors that focused more on function than comfort. But when the Starliner appeared in 1954, it looked like something far more modern. The design was long, smooth, and surprisingly elegant for a bus of that era. Huge windows ran along the sides, giving passengers a much wider view of the outside world. And that was exactly the point. This coach was built for long highway journeys across America. Instead of just getting people from one city to another, the Starliner was designed to make the trip itself feel special. Imagine sitting inside this bus in the 1950s, the highway stretching for miles ahead, landscapes passing by the giant windows, and the steady sound of the engine carrying you across the country. Under the body, the Starliner was also impressive for its time. It used strong engineering and reliable diesel power that made it perfect for long-distance routes. Bus companies loved it because it could travel thousands of miles while still keeping passengers comfortable. But what really made the Starliner stand out was its appearance. Compared to many other buses of that era, it looked sleek and futuristic. It had a presence on the road that made people turn their heads when it passed by. And that's why the Starliner became such a memorable machine. It wasn't just transportation, it represented a time when long-distance bus travel felt like a real journey. Today, the Flxible Starliner is remembered as one of the most elegant coaches of the 1950s, a bus that proved practical transportation could also look surprisingly stylish. Now, this last bus on the list might look a little more familiar, but in the early 1970s, the MAN SL200 represented a completely new direction in bus design. By this time, cities across Europe were growing fast. Streets were getting busier, passenger numbers were increasing, and transport companies needed something reliable, efficient, and easy to maintain. That's where the SL200 came in. Built by the German manufacturer MAN, this bus was designed primarily for urban transport. But what made it interesting wasn't just how it worked, it was how modern it looked compared to many buses before it. The design was clean, simple, and practical. Large windows made the interior feel open and bright for passengers, while the wide doors allowed people to get on and off quickly during busy city routes. Under the body, the SL200 used a powerful diesel engine that was built for durability. These buses could run for years, sometimes even decades, carrying thousands of passengers every single day. And that reliability is exactly why the SL200 became so widely used. Many cities across Europe adopted this model, and for a long time it became a very common sight on urban streets. But if you look at it today, you can still see why it stands out in a list of vintage buses. Compared to the curved, experimental shapes of the 1950s, the MAN SL200 represents a new era, a time when bus design shifted toward practicality and modern city transport. And in many ways, this bus helped define what a modern city bus would look like for decades to come. The MAN SL200 might not look as futuristic as some of the earlier machines on this list, but its influence on public transportation was huge, making it one of the most important vintage buses ever built.